by and large, I like the comments that come out of my videos. I think 99% of the time, I think they're pretty damn solid. And I often learn things. I think people give some good comments on there. But there are a handful of statements that go over and over and over. Like I see them over and over and over. And I'm not talking about that weirdo sex chat line thing that the spam that comes up. I just try and remove those people from channel whenever I see them. I'm talking about statements made by comic fans that just get it kind of regurgitated out. They don't have any meaning, and frankly, they're wrong. What are they? I'm going to go through them right here.
Sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. I've been on Wes's channel over Thinking Critical, and he does these like 5 things that go on within the industry. I think it's a brilliant idea. I like it. It's a good format. You don't do it every time. You don't become BuzzFeed, but every now and then it's cool. I think they're a great one, and I'm hoping to do more with him. I'm going to leave this bit to him, but I wanted to really do one for this channel because this is specifically kind of commenting on comments I get. Now, like I said, I'm really happy with the comments I typically get on the channel. They're very valuable. A lot of people put a lot of thought into them. I get really long comments, which I notice on other channels that doesn't happen. Like people write and really put some time into it. And I really want to thank you guys for that. It makes me feel like I've got a really smart audience, and I do. So thank you. You're a lot smarter than I am by every measurement. But there are 6 statements that I pulled out that come up kind of repeatedly that are not. They're slogans, or they're just wrong. And so I want to get into them, starting with number 1, and this is one that you see a lot. It's the comic industry is imploding and about to die. Why is this a dumb statement? Well, because it's not factually accurate. There's lots of areas of the comic industry that are doing just fine. And no, this isn't a nuance. This isn't me saying, well, actually, there's this one area that's doing okay. No, by and large, the comic industry is doing okay, if not well. It's just that a lot of the comic businesses that some of us may have grown up with aren't doing as well, and things are absolutely changing. But it goes, and it's going to be a recurring theme in this list. It goes back to this extremism that a company can have a round of layoffs, or things can go bad. And it doesn't mean that the entire world is ending. But that's how we talk in 2020 with everything. Everything is at its biggest extreme. It's perfect. What are you talking about? It's never been as good as this. This is the greatest movie ever. I mean, look no further than The Last Jedi, which is a perfect example of this exact thing. The movie was the best Star Wars movie of all time, or was proof that the entire industry is bankrupt, going to hell. Disney was about to go under, emoji picture of a screaming face. It's rarely that way. The comic industry is not imploding, and it's not about to die. But of course, there are problems. And when I object to this, and I've had other YouTubers get mad at me for objecting to them saying this, but the fact is, when you say stuff like this, it's absurd on its surface. People don't take it seriously. It does generate a legion of kind of dopes that are running out there kind of repeating this stuff, and it's not accurate. It makes everybody look stupid, and we all waste our lives and our time talking about it. But number 2, this one is a personal annoyance to me. Great writers give people what they need, not what they want. All right, that's bullshit. I'm sorry. It sounds nice. It sounds very fancy. It sounds like something you would get in English lit class. This isn't actually how marketing or products work. Yes, there have been very successful people like Steve Jobs who have been able to come up and say, I didn't go and I didn't just give people what they're asking for. I figured out what they needed and I gave them that. That's great if you're Steve Jobs. That's great if you're hugely successful in able to put this out. This isn't how comics work. Comics are not the same thing. Even J.K. Rowling, who is, one of the wealthiest authors living on the planet today for Harry Potter, whether you like those books or you didn't like those books, or maybe you like those books, but then she said some things about trans people you didn't like, so now you hate those books, wherever you fall in that spectrum. Even she noted that, yes, she came up with creative story, but she also looked into what people were asking for. She listened to what the fans wanted, as the book progressed. She didn't let it completely steer what she did. She didn't just turn into an order taker and give exactly the book that people were asking for in book 6 or 7. She killed off characters that were fan favorites, certainly, but she also took feedback and listened to what people were after. This is kind of like the first one. It's not so binary. You don't just operate in a bubble and give people what they need. Again, really great, talented, super geniuses get to know how to do this, but even those people understand the value of understanding what customers want. You don't just ignore that. You don't just say Today, this gets thrown around as a really stuffy statement. It's like a bunch of fans saying, "You know what? We would really like a good old-fashioned superhero adventure," and this douchebag coming up and saying, "Well, we don't want to give the customers what they're asking for, not what they want. We need to give them what they need." That's great if you know what they need, but a lot more people have gone broke and have been washed out of this industry and many industries thinking they knew better than their customers, and they didn't. If you're a genius, super. Maybe this works for you. You're so in touch with customers. But for most people, this isn't how it actually works. The third, the 90s were the absolute perfect era for comics. Now, okay, this one there is some nuance here, and that is if you love the comics in the 90s, if they worked for you and these are the comics you remember and love the best, then this is a true statement for you. Great. But for most in the industry, including comic shops and publishers and others, this was a time of bankruptcy and setbacks. Yes, there were some amazing comics that got sold during this time period. You had Jim Lee on the X-Men, you had all his variant covers, you had the Image Revolution, you had a lot of my favorite indie comics came out of this time period. That said, there was a lot of disaster. And when people say things like we need to go back to the 90s, what they don't realize they're saying is we need to go back to a time where the business was in imminent danger of collapsing. There was always going to be indie comics, but it was a colossal hellscape shit show for a lot of companies back then. And several people romanticize the 90s just like I think several people romanticize the 80s. The difference is the 80s built a lot of business and tended to sustain it out of the decade. The 90s were a roller coaster of ups and downs, and there were some pretty ugly downs during this time period. Now, again, if you love comics during this period, more power to you. There's nothing wrong with that. I love many comics during this time period, but it's not the paragon of where the comic industry was at. And a lot of people use this to describe where the comic industry needs to go. The ugly truth of it is, people may not like this as an answer. Today's current 2020, there's more money in comics than in the 90s. What? You say that's impossible. Look at what was going on with the X-Men in the 90s. Yes, if you want to say Marvel in the 90s, early 90s, you want to specifically pick a year, 92 Marvel versus 2020 Marvel. Oh yeah, 91, 92 Marvel, doing much better than 2020 Marvel. No doubt about it. In terms of raw comic sales, sure. In terms of the comic industry as a whole, no. So again, it's all in the details. Number 4, comics have a responsibility to comment on social topics. Yeah, no, they don't. No, nothing has a responsibility to comment on social topics. Why this bugs me is that it's usually thrown out when people are complaining about a comic being too preachy or going into some political topic here or there. The reality, though, is I think when people complain about too many politics in comics or too many social topics, they could probably make their lives a lot simpler by saying, this story sucked. And it's true. A lot of stories that try and hack in social topics do suck. It's no different than in the 80s. See, we're going to go back there to having the G.I. Joe commercials where it says, there'd be some lesson taught and the Joe would be like, and now you know, and knowing is half the battle. It seemed cheesy. Remember Captain Planet? You may have some fond memories of it from a nostalgic point of view, but that show sucked. A lot of this stuff sucked. And today's version of hacking in social topics into comics often doesn't play out well. Comics don't have a responsibility to do this. Now, if you can tell a great story and it hits on social topics and you have a deeper meaning, that's awesome. And you should do that, and more power to you. But you don't have a responsibility to do it. You have a responsibility to basically keep your employer in business. That's what your responsibility is. I know that sounds not romantic. It doesn't sound like the comic industry and everything else, but job number 1 of DC and Marvel is sell comics and keep the lights on. And if they do that job really, really badly, they won't, and others will take their spot. So you don't have a responsibility to comment on anything. And it doesn't matter if the world is blowing up outside. In many cases, comic books aren't the best place to do that. Now, that's my opinion. Maybe you find this an absolute perfect place to put in social commentary. And again, more power to you. But there's no guideline or rule that says that comic books have to comment on social topics. That's ridiculous. This one's a personal pet peeve. Number 5, asking these kinds of questions is a dog whistle. Now, first off, there's a number of terms in 2020 that are just have been dug into the grave of overuse and bad use. Things like things like dog whistle, things like straw manning, things like sea lioning, things like conflating. These are words that get tossed out by people who I think believe they have this picture in their head of them like with a monocle and a top hat sipping on some scotch, and they're, I am a scholar. Look at the big words I'm using. That's not how you're coming across. You're coming across like a douche, and you're not even using those words well. First off, I ask a lot of questions on my channel, and I'm going to keep doing it. If you think this is some kind of coded dog whistle, you're an idiot. But it's your show. You're welcome to. But you are an idiot. I don't think we should be afraid of asking questions. I think you should always ask questions. Now, I take great pains with the little preview art and the thumbnail not to make my videos sound clickbaity. Some people have said they do. A very famous comic writer at one of the big twos said I was too clickbaity in my titles. I would welcome the guy who's a far better writer than I am to write my titles. If there's a better way to do it, please, by all means, step in. I can use your help. But my intention is not to clickbait. I don't care about trying to spike this or that. And believe it or not, I have edited the hell out of a lot of these videos to try and reduce that. I don't write things like, Tom King shocks us, let's find out how, or any of that shit in the videos. I tend to just go pretty straightforward. This is the question, here's an answer. Sometimes I'm limited by character size. I'm trying to make it as simple as I possibly can. But asking questions is not a dog whistle. For those of you who are like wondering what the hell this is basically saying that if you do any kind of video talking about Captain Marvel, you're dog whistling to a bunch of bigots who are going to come in and insult women. And I'm sorry, that's stupid. If you live in that kind of world where you're afraid to ask questions, you're afraid to bring up certain topics because you have to struggle. I mean, frankly, I'm ashamed of myself. I do it too much already of trying to work and rework the titles so they sound neutral and just like questions. I think that's kind of crappy that I have to do that because if I don't, invariably somebody's going to come in saying, "Oh, look at it! Look at him! He's playing to the evil troll people." Come on, we can't be afraid to ask questions. If you're afraid to ask questions, then you know you've already lost. A lot of these questions need to be asked. They're valuable. They're useful. And if we just ignore them for dumb reasons, that serves nobody. Ask a question, try and be fair. You have a different opinion. Hey, lots of people have different opinions from me. Throw them in the comments. Those are cool. But otherwise, come on, don't be an idiot. And then the final one, the other side is toxic. I don't know if it's just me, but is anyone else tired of toxic as a term for everything? It's become people who don't agree with me. Hey, I put out this comic. Somebody didn't like it. They must be toxic. Hey, I've got a comment that I put in here. Somebody disagrees with me. They're clearly toxic fans. Toxic means nothing. It's come to mean the person I don't agree with. Frankly, a lot of people, if that's a silliness of this whole statement, is both sides point to the other liberally about how toxic they are. Democrats, toxic. Republicans, toxic. Comic fans, toxic. Comic pros, toxic. They're all toxic. Hey, here's an idea. Maybe social media just kind of turns everybody into assholes. Maybe that's it. Maybe because we're having to force our thoughts into a limited character space and, we get attention more on hot takes than nuance, maybe it just kind of turns everybody into being a bit of an a-hole. I don't know. That could be. In which case, everyone is toxic or no one is toxic. Look, we spend a lot of time making up words for something that's really simple. People who are jerks are jerks. Maybe there are a bunch of ists and phobes and all the rest there too, but I don't know. Maybe in a simpler world, they can just be jerks or dicks or whatever you want to call it. Maybe these people are just assholes. You could leave it there. Constantly pointing to the other side of being toxic isn't doing anyone any good. It's not helping comic sales. It's not helping anybody enjoy stories. It's just helping people fight. Anyway, these are my 5. Hey, common statements that are wrong or annoying or whatever you want to put to it. Do you want to disagree? You should. Go to the comment below, disagree, dislike, hate, remove, unsubscribe, all of those things. Please do. I'm having some fun with this. If by the way, if you listen to this point and you're like, man, he seems really annoyed. No, I'm I'm just having fun with this. It's been a long day and I could use a good laugh. There you go. Hope you got one too. Thanks for listening.